November 15, 1940, de Havilland Aircraft Company, Hatfield, England. Charles Clement Walker, Chief Inspector and Senior Mechanic at de Havilland for 23 years, stood before an Air Ministry Procurement Board and committed what amounted to professional heresy. He was advocating for an aircraft design that violated every established principle of British fighter and bomber doctrine. The aircraft he proposed would carry no defensive guns, zero. Not a single Browning machine gun for protection against enemy fighters. In an era when British bombers bristled with defensive turrets and fighter aircraft mounted 8 or more guns, Walker was suggesting an unarmed combat aircraft. The Air Ministry officers looked at him as if he had suggested building aircraft from cardboard. But Walker's heresy didn't stop there. His proposed aircraft would be constructed primarily from wood, not metal, not the stressed aluminum skin that defined modern aircraft construction. Wood, the same material used in World War I biplanes. In 1940, as Germany produced all-metal Messerschmitts and Britain built aluminum Spitfires, Walker wanted to build a wooden aircraft. And there was more. His design would use 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same engines that powered Spitfire fighters. At a time when Merlin production couldn't meet existing demand, Walker wanted to divert precious engines to an experimental aircraft that seemed to contradict everything modern air warfare had proven. The Air Ministry Board's response was swift and unequivocal. The proposal was rejected. The design was impractical. The concept was fundamentally flawed. Walker and his design team were politely but firmly told to stop wasting time on impossible ideas and focus on building conventional aircraft to established specifications. But Charles Walker didn't stop. Neither did Geoffrey de Havilland, the company founder who supported Walker's vision. Over the next 18 months, they would fight bureaucratic opposition, overcome material shortages, solve engineering problems that experts called insurmountable, and ultimately create the de Havilland Mosquito. This wooden, unarmed aircraft that the Air Ministry had rejected would become the most versatile combat aircraft of World War II. It would achieve kill ratios that exceeded dedicated fighters. It would complete bombing missions with loss rates 1/10 those of heavy bombers. And it would prove that sometimes the most radical ideas, the ones that break every rule, are the ones that change warfare forever. The story began not in 1940, but 4 years earlier, in 1936, when de Havilland Aircraft Company was primarily known for civilian transport aircraft and trainers. The company had built military aircraft, but they weren't considered frontline producers like Supermarine, Hawker, or Bristol. They occupied a secondary tier in British aircraft manufacturing, respected, but not prestigious. Charles Walker had joined de Havilland in 1917, straight from technical college. He'd worked his way from apprentice mechanic to chief inspector, a position that made him responsible for quality control on every aircraft the company produced. Over 23 years, he'd developed an intimate understanding of aircraft construction, materials, and performance characteristics that exceeded many formally trained engineers. Walker had also developed strong opinions about aircraft design philosophy. He believed the industry had become obsessed with armament and armor at the expense of performance. British bombers had become slower as they added defensive gun turrets. Fighters had become heavier as they mounted more guns and ammunition. Everyone was building tougher, more heavily armed aircraft. Walker believed they should be building faster aircraft instead. His reasoning was straightforward. An aircraft that could outrun enemy fighters didn't need defensive guns. An aircraft that could outrun enemy interceptors didn't need armor protection. Speed was the ultimate defense. But this philosophy contradicted established Air Ministry doctrine, which specified armament requirements for every aircraft category. In 1938, Walker began informal discussions with a small group of de Havilland engineers about a radical aircraft design. They weren't authorized to pursue this work. It wasn't a contracted project. It was essentially unauthorized research that Walker and his colleagues conducted in spare time and kept quiet from Air Ministry oversight. The design concept emerged from analyzing combat requirements and material constraints. Britain would soon be at war. Aircraft production would need to expand dramatically, but aluminum supplies would be limited, and skilled metal workers would be in short supply. Traditional aircraft construction methods would create bottlenecks that would limit production, regardless of how many factories were built. But Britain had abundant wood supplies. The furniture industry employed thousands of skilled woodworkers who could be retrained for aircraft construction. Wood construction techniques could be performed in smaller workshops dispersed across the countryside, making production less vulnerable to bombing than concentrated aluminum aircraft factories. If someone could design a high-performance aircraft using wood construction, production could scale beyond what metal construction could achieve. Walker's team began with fundamental questions. Could wood construction achieve adequate strength-to-weight ratios for high-performance aircraft? Most experts said no. Wood was heavier than aluminum for equivalent strength, but Walker noted that wood could be formed into monocoque structures where the skin itself was structural, eliminating the need for separate internal frameworks. This might offset the weight penalty. Could wooden aircraft achieve adequate aerodynamic smoothness? Again, experts were skeptical. Metal aircraft could be riveted with flush rivets, creating smooth surfaces. Wood construction traditionally used fabric covering over wooden frameworks, creating rough surfaces. But Walker proposed using thin plywood sheets laminated into compound curves, then covered with fabric doped smooth. The result might be smoother than riveted metal. Could wooden aircraft withstand combat damage? This was the most serious objection. Metal aircraft could absorb bullet holes and continue flying. Wood would splinter and lose structural integrity. But Walker argued that speed was better protection than toughness. An aircraft that couldn't be caught couldn't be shot. This circular logic drove Air Ministry officials crazy, but Walker believed it completely. By September 1939, when Britain declared war on Germany, Walker's unauthorized design had progressed to preliminary specifications. The aircraft would be a twin-engine design using two Merlin engines. It would have a crew of two, pilot and navigator, seated side by side in the nose section. It would be constructed primarily from wood using innovative lamination techniques. And critically, it would be unarmed except for its bomb load if configured as a bomber, or forward-firing guns if configured as a fighter. Geoffrey de Havilland, company founder and chief designer, reviewed Walker's proposal with interest. De Havilland was an aviation pioneer who'd built and flown his first aircraft in 1910. He had an intuitive understanding of what made aircraft work, and Walker's radical design appealed to his innovative spirit. But de Havilland also understood bureaucratic reality. The Air Ministry would never approve such an unconventional design without compelling justification. The justification came from analyzing early combat data. In the first months of war, British bombers attacking Germany suffered catastrophic losses. German fighters easily intercepted the slow, heavily armed bombers. Defensive guns weren't preventing losses. Armor wasn't saving aircraft. The bombers were simply too slow to survive against modern fighters. Meanwhile, German aircraft were demonstrating that speed provided effective protection. The Junkers 88 medium bomber, though lightly armed, achieved acceptable survival rates through high speed. The Messerschmitt 110, though primarily a fighter, could perform fighter-bomber missions effectively because it was too fast for older fighters to intercept. Walker argued that Britain needed a fast bomber that could outrun German fighters rather than outgun them. This bomber could operate in daylight without massive fighter escort. It could strike tactical targets with precision impossible at night. And it could be produced in large numbers using wood construction techniques that wouldn't compete with metal aircraft production. In February 1940, de Havilland formally proposed the design to the Air Ministry. The proposal document, largely written by Walker, was revolutionary. It proposed a twin-engine aircraft capable of 400 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour, faster than any operational bomber and comparable to most fighters. It would carry a 1,000-pound bomb load over 1,500 miles. And it would achieve this performance without defensive armament, relying entirely on speed for survival. The Air Ministry's response was immediate rejection. The director of bomber operations stated that the concept of an unarmed bomber is fundamentally unsound. The proposals violated established doctrine that all bombers required defensive armament. Technical experts questioned whether wood construction could achieve the claimed performance. Procurement officials noted that diverting Merlin engines from Spitfire production to experimental aircraft was unacceptable when fighter production couldn't meet operational requirements. But Jeffrey de Havilland had political connections that Walker lacked. He personally lobbied Air Chief Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman, the Air Council member responsible for development and production. Freeman was known for supporting innovative ideas, and he recognized that Britain needed unconventional solutions to survive the war. In March 1940, Freeman authorized construction of a single prototype for evaluation purposes only. This was not approval for production, merely permission to prove the concept could work. Walker's team began building the prototype in April 1940 under conditions of extreme urgency. Britain had survived the winter, but everyone knew Germany would launch major offensives in spring. The prototype needed to fly soon, or it would be irrelevant. Walker organized 3 shifts, working around the clock. The workforce included de Havilland's regular employees, plus recruited furniture makers and boat builders, who understood wood lamination techniques. The construction method Walker developed was revolutionary. The fuselage was built in 2 halves, each consisting of plywood sheets laminated around molds to create smooth compound curves. The 2 halves were then joined along the vertical center line, creating a monocoque structure where the skin itself was structural. No internal framework was needed except around openings and hard points. The wings used similar techniques, but with more complex internal structures to handle flight loads. Each wing was built around 2 main spars with plywood skin laminated to create torsion boxes. The result was incredibly strong for the weight, but required precision that skeptics claimed was impossible in wood construction. Walker proved them wrong through meticulous quality control and innovative tooling. By September 1940, as the Battle of Britain raged overhead, the prototype was nearing completion. It didn't look like any existing aircraft. The nose was glazed, providing the crew exceptional visibility. The fuselage was sleek and smooth, with no turrets or gun positions interrupting the aerodynamic lines. The wooden construction was invisible under fabric and dope finish that created a surface smoother than most metal aircraft achieved. The prototype, designated E-0234, first flew on November 25, 1940. Test pilot Jeffrey de Havilland, Jr., son of the company founder, reported that the aircraft exceeded all predictions. It was fast, maneuverable, and pleasant to fly. Initial speed tests suggested it would exceed 400 miles per hour, making it faster than most operational fighters. But impressive test flights weren't enough to overcome Air Ministry skepticism. In December 1940, officials observed the prototype's performance and remained unconvinced. Yes, it was fast, but could it survive combat without defensive guns? Could wooden construction withstand battle damage? Could the design be produced in quantities large enough to matter? Each question reflected institutional resistance to concepts that violated established doctrine. Walker and de Havilland faced a dilemma. They believed their aircraft was exactly what Britain needed. But they couldn't prove it without getting production approval, and they couldn't get production approval without proving it worked in combat. The circular logic seemed impossible to break. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. The Royal Air Force's photo-reconnaissance unit was desperately seeking aircraft capable of photographing targets deep in occupied Europe. Existing reconnaissance aircraft were too slow and suffered heavy losses. The PRU needed something fast enough to outrun German fighters. When PRU Wing Commander Jeffrey Tuttle saw the Mosquito prototype's performance data, he immediately recognized its potential. A fast, unarmed aircraft was exactly what photo-reconnaissance required. In January 1941, Tuttle formally requested that the Mosquito be developed as a reconnaissance aircraft, bypassing the bomber debate entirely. This request changed everything. The Air Ministry could approve a small reconnaissance production run without endorsing the controversial unarmed bomber concept. In March 1941, an order for 50 reconnaissance Mosquitoes was placed. Walker and his team had finally gotten their chance, though not in the role they'd originally envisioned. But Walker wasn't satisfied with just reconnaissance versions. He pushed de Havilland management to simultaneously develop fighter and bomber variants. Walker believed the basic design was so sound that it could excel in multiple roles. This multi-purpose capability would ultimately become the Mosquito's greatest strength, though few recognized it in early 1941. The fighter variant raised new questions. If the Mosquito was supposed to be fast enough to not need defensive guns, why would it need offensive guns? Walker's answer was that fighter missions required armament to destroy targets, not for self-defense. The Mosquito fighter would carry 4 20mm cannons and 4 machine guns in the nose, devastating firepower concentrated in a solid nose without turret weight or drag. This fighter variant would have no defensive armament at all. If attacked from behind, the Mosquito would simply outrun the attacker. If it couldn't outrun the attacker, defensive guns wouldn't save it anyway, because fighters attacking from behind had overwhelming advantage. Better to eliminate defensive gun weight and use the saved weight for more speed and more ammunition for offensive weapons. The bomber variant presented different challenges. Conventional bombers carried large bomb loads by sacrificing speed. Walker wanted to reverse this equation, carrying moderate bomb loads at high speed. The initial bomber variant was designed for a 4,000-pound maximum bomb load, much less than heavy bombers, but delivered with precision impossible for nighttime area bombing. By mid-1941, 3 distinct Mosquito variants were under development simultaneously. The photo-reconnaissance version with cameras and no armament, the fighter version with heavy forward-firing armament and no defensive guns, and the bomber version with bomb bay and no defensive guns. This development approach was unusual, but reflected Walker's vision of a universal fast platform adaptable to multiple roles. Production began in late 1941 at several facilities, including the main de Havilland factory at Hatfield and dispersed workshops throughout southern England. The dispersed production proved prescient. In April 1941, Luftwaffe bombers had destroyed part of the Hatfield factory. If all Mosquito production had been concentrated there, the program might have been crippled. The dispersed wood construction workshops, housed in furniture factories and even churches, continued production without interruption. The first operational Mosquitoes entered service with the Royal Air Force's photo-reconnaissance unit in July 1941. These unarmed, ultra-fast aircraft flew deep into occupied Europe, photographing targets that bombers would later strike. German fighters attempted interceptions, but simply couldn't catch the Mosquitoes, which cruised at speeds above 400 miles per hour and could reach 430 miles per hour in emergency situations. The reconnaissance Mosquito's success rate was extraordinary. In their first 6 months of operations, they completed over 200 reconnaissance missions with only 2 aircraft lost to all causes, including mechanical failures. This represented a loss rate below 1% compared to 15 to 20% loss rates for conventional bombers. The numbers validated Walker's core philosophy Speed was better defense than armor or guns, but the fighter and bomber variants still faced skepticism. In November 1941, the first fighter Mosquitoes joined No. 151 Squadron for evaluation. The squadron's pilots, accustomed to heavily armed heavy fighters, were uncertain about an aircraft with no rear-facing defensive armament. What would they do if attacked from behind by German fighters? The answer came during their first combat mission on December 19, 1941. Flight Lieutenant Roger Morwood encountered a Junkers 88 over the North Sea. The German bomber was faster than most British fighters, usually escaping pursuit, but Morwood's Mosquito simply accelerated past it, positioned ahead, then turned back for a head-on attack. The Junkers exploded under fire from 4 cannons and 4 machine guns. Morwood reported afterward, "I didn't need defensive guns. I was faster than he was. I could choose the engagement angle." The heavy nose armament destroyed him before he could react. This engagement pattern repeated consistently. Mosquito fighters could catch German aircraft that other British fighters couldn't intercept. They could position for optimal attacks because their speed gave them initiative, and their concentrated forward armament destroyed targets with single bursts that dispersed fighter armament couldn't match. The lack of defensive guns, initially seen as fatal weakness, proved irrelevant because Mosquito speed made defensive combat unnecessary. If you're discovering these incredible stories of World War II innovation that defied conventional wisdom and changed history, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We bring you deep research into the real stories behind military technology and the individuals who created it. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next exploration of innovation that changed warfare. The bomber variant entered operational service in May 1942 with No. 105 Squadron. The first combat mission was a precision daylight raid on the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, Norway, on September 25, 1942. 4 Mosquito bombers attacked from low altitude, achieved complete surprise, destroyed the target building, and all returned safely. The mission demonstrated capabilities that heavy bombers simply couldn't achieve: precision, speed, surprise, and survival. Over the following months, Mosquito bombers conducted increasingly ambitious missions. They attacked factories, rail yards, and military installations across occupied Europe in daylight, flying too fast for German fighters to intercept. Loss rates remained below 2%, extraordinary for daylight bombing operations that conventional wisdom said were suicidal without heavy fighter escort. The Mosquito's success created problems for Air Ministry officials who'd rejected the original proposal. They'd been wrong. Spectacularly wrong. An aircraft they'd called impossible had become one of the most effective combat aircraft in service. The wooden construction they'd derided was producing aircraft faster than many metal production lines. The unarmed bomber concept they'd rejected was achieving better survival rates than heavily armed bombers. But rather than admit error, Air Ministry bureaucrats claimed they had always supported the Mosquito program. Reports were rewritten, meeting minutes were revised. The official narrative became that the Air Ministry had recognized the Mosquito's potential from the beginning and had wisely supported its development. Charles Walker, the mechanic whose illegal idea had created the aircraft, was barely mentioned in official accounts. This bureaucratic appropriation infuriated de Havilland Company personnel who'd fought for the Mosquito's approval, but it also ensured continued support and expansion of the program. By mid-1943, Mosquito production had expanded to thousands of aircraft annually. The design had proven so versatile that multiple specialized variants were under development. The Mosquito night fighter variant, equipped with airborne radar, became the most successful night fighter in RAF service. It could patrol at high altitude for hours, detect German bombers with its radar, then intercept them with speed advantage and devastating firepower. German bomber crews began calling the Mosquito the Maker because once you heard its Merlin engines, You knew death was coming. Statistics from night fighting operations showed the Mosquito's extraordinary effectiveness. A typical Mosquito night fighter achieved approximately 8 to 12 German bomber kills during its operational career. The previous generation Beaufighter night fighter averaged approximately 3 to 5 kills. The Mosquito's speed, radar, and concentrated armament made it approximately 3 times more lethal than the aircraft it replaced. The bomber variants continued evolving. By late 1943, Mosquito bombers were carrying 4,000-pound cookies, the same massive blast bombs used by heavy bombers. But unlike heavy bombers that lumbered to targets at night and dropped bombs hoping for general area destruction, Mosquitoes attacked specific targets in daylight with precision that bordered on surgical. The most famous Mosquito bombing mission occurred on January 30th, 1944. 3 Mosquitoes attacked Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen, Denmark, flying at rooftop level to avoid radar detection, then pulling up to strike the building with pinpoint accuracy. The raid destroyed Gestapo records and killed German personnel while minimizing civilian casualties. It was the kind of precision operation that validated everything Walker had argued about fast bombers. German attempts to counter the Mosquito proved largely ineffective. They developed faster fighter variants, but the Mosquito continued receiving engine upgrades that maintained its speed advantage. They deployed more anti-aircraft guns along likely Mosquito routes, but the Mosquito's speed made accurate anti-aircraft fire nearly impossible. They tried night fighter interceptions, but the Mosquito could outrun German night fighters even in darkness. By 1944, Germany was producing the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter, partly in response to the Mosquito threat. The jet fighter could catch Mosquitoes, but there were never enough jets to matter. Germany was responding to Britain's wooden aircraft with their most advanced technology, a remarkable validation of Walker's radical design. The wooden construction that Air Ministry officials had dismissed as obsolete proved to have unexpected advantages. Battle damage assessment showed that Mosquitoes absorbed cannon fire better than metal aircraft. Cannon shells passed through plywood skin without causing catastrophic structural failure, whereas similar hits on metal aircraft often caused catastrophic damage. Wood's flexibility absorbed impacts that would crack metal structures. Mosquitoes with massive battle damage frequently returned to base when metal aircraft would have been destroyed. One famous incident involved a Mosquito that returned from a mission with 2 feet of its tail section simply missing, blown away by flak. The wooden structure's flexibility allowed the aircraft to remain controllable. A metal aircraft would have suffered structural collapse from similar damage. The production advantages of wood construction exceeded even Walker's optimistic predictions. By 1944, approximately 45 dispersed workshops were producing Mosquito components. These included furniture factories that normally built tables and chairs, boatyards that normally built wooden sailing vessels, and even piano manufacturers who understood complex wood lamination. This dispersed production network proved nearly invulnerable to German bombing. Even after raids destroyed main factories, the dispersed workshops continued producing components. Mosquito production reached approximately 400 aircraft monthly by mid-1944, numbers that would have been impossible with metal construction, given aluminum shortages and metal worker scarcity. The wooden construction that seemed antiquated had proven more suitable for total war mass production than modern metal construction methods. The versatility Walker had envisioned reached its peak in 1944. Mosquitoes served as day bombers, night fighters, reconnaissance aircraft, fighter bombers, anti-shipping, strike aircraft, pathfinders for bomber streams, and even as high-speed transport aircraft for priority cargo. No other aircraft in any air force matched this versatility. The Mosquito could be configured for virtually any tactical or strategic mission. statistical analysis of Mosquito combat effectiveness validated Walker's controversial design decisions. Mosquito bombers achieved an average loss rate of approximately 0.6% per mission across all operations. Heavy bombers like the Lancaster averaged approximately 3.5% loss rates. The Mosquito's survival rate was nearly 6 times better while delivering comparable destructive effect when measured by tonnage on target per aircraft lost. Mosquito fighter variants achieved kill ratios exceeding 5-to-1 against German aircraft. The average Mosquito fighter destroyed 5 German aircraft for every Mosquito lost to all causes. This compared to approximately 2-to-1 kill ratios for conventional single-engine fighters. The Mosquito's speed and concentrated armament made it deadlier per engagement than smaller, more maneuverable fighters. The reconnaissance Mosquitoes achieved the most impressive statistics. Across all reconnaissance operations, Mosquito loss rates never exceeded 1.2%. These aircraft flew the most dangerous missions, deep into Germany photographing heavily defended targets, yet survived at rates that conventional wisdom said were impossible without defensive armament and heavy armor. By war's end, approximately 7,900 Mosquitoes had been produced, making it one of Britain's most produced combat aircraft. The type served in every theater of war: Europe, Mediterranean, Middle East, Far East, and even limited numbers in the Pacific. Every major Allied Air Force operated Mosquitoes: RAF, USAAF, Royal Canadian Air Force, Royal Australian Air Force, and others. Charles Walker, the mechanic whose illegal idea started it all, remained at de Havilland throughout the war. He never achieved the public recognition that designers like R.J. Mitchell or Sidney Cam received. His name appeared in no newspaper articles. He received no medals or public honors. But within de Havilland and among the pilots who flew Mosquitoes, he was legendary as the man who'd fought Air Ministry bureaucracy and won. Walker retired from de Havilland in 1952 after 35 years with the company. In a rare interview years later, he reflected, "I never claimed to invent the Mosquito. Mr. de Havilland and his design team created the aircraft, but I contributed the philosophy. I argued that speed was more valuable than guns or armor. I pushed for wood construction when everyone wanted metal, and I refused to accept that bureaucrats who'd never built an aircraft knew better than mechanics who'd built thousands. The Mosquito succeeded because we ignored what experts said was impossible and built what we knew would work." This modest assessment undersells Walker's contribution. Without his persistent advocacy, the Mosquito would never have been proposed. Without his wood construction expertise, it couldn't have been built. Without his willingness to fight Air Ministry opposition, it would have died in the proposal stage. The Mosquito was as much Walker's achievement as any formally trained designer's. Before we conclude this remarkable story, if you're fascinated by how unconventional thinking and determination can overcome institutional resistance to create world-changing innovation, please subscribe to our channel. We research the untold stories behind military history's greatest achievements. Hit subscribe and the notification bell to join our community of history enthusiasts who appreciate the real complexity behind historical breakthroughs. The post-war assessment of the Mosquito validated everything Walker had argued. A Royal Air Force analysis completed in 1946 concluded, "The Mosquito represents perhaps the most cost-effective combat aircraft of the war. Its loss rates were the lowest of any offensive aircraft. Its versatility exceeded any comparable design. Its production efficiency, using non-strategic materials and dispersed labor, enabled quantity production that metal construction could not have achieved under wartime conditions." The aircraft, initially rejected as impractical, proved to be among the most practical designs of the conflict. The technical lessons influenced post-war aircraft development. The Mosquito demonstrated that speed could substitute for armor and defensive armament. This principle influenced jet fighter design, where speed became the primary defense against interceptors. Modern fighters carry no defensive armament, following the precedent the Mosquito established. The Mosquito also demonstrated that aircraft could be designed for multiple roles rather than single specialized missions. Modern multi-role fighters like the F-15 or F-18 trace their conceptual lineage to the Mosquito's proven versatility. The idea that one basic airframe could be adapted for reconnaissance, fighter, bomber, and strike missions became standard practice after the Mosquito proved the concept. Most significantly, the Mosquito validated the principle that institutional wisdom can be wrong and that individuals with practical experience sometimes understand requirements better than bureaucratic processes. The Air Ministry experts who rejected Walker's proposal weren't stupid or malicious. They were applying established doctrine based on extensive combat experience. But they were wrong, and Walker, a mechanic with no formal engineering credentials, was right. This lesson remains relevant today. Military organizations still struggle with tension between established doctrine and innovative ideas. Procurement processes still favor conventional solutions over radical proposals. And institutional resistance still crushes promising concepts that threaten established thinking. The Mosquito's success stands as a reminder that breakthrough innovations often come from unexpected sources and require determined advocates willing to fight bureaucratic opposition. Several Mosquito aircraft survive in museums worldwide. The de Havilland Aircraft Museum at London Colney displays multiple variants showing the aircraft's versatility. Visitors can see the cramped two-person cockpit, the wooden construction hidden under smooth exterior finish, and the various gun, bomb, or camera installations that made the Mosquito effective in so many roles. The preserved aircraft illustrate the design brilliance that overcame initial skepticism. Veterans who flew Mosquitoes remained uniformly enthusiastic about the aircraft decades after the war. Group Captain Peter Wycombe Barnes, who commanded Mosquito squadrons, wrote in 1970, "The Mosquito was the finest aircraft I ever flew. It was fast, responsive, and versatile. But more than that, it represented triumph of practical thinking over bureaucratic rigidity. The fact that it was built at all against official opposition gives me hope that good ideas can still overcome institutional resistance." This assessment captures the Mosquito's dual legacy. It was both an exceptional aircraft and a bureaucratic triumph. The technical achievements were impressive, but the organizational achievement of getting it built, despite Air Ministry opposition, was perhaps more remarkable. The story demonstrates that innovation requires not just good ideas, but also determined advocates willing to fight for those ideas against institutional inertia. The comparison with other World War II aircraft illuminates the Mosquito's unique success. The B-17 and Lancaster were magnificent heavy bombers, but they suffered horrific losses and required massive fighter escorts. The Spitfire and Mustang were superb fighters, but they lacked the versatility for reconnaissance and bombing missions. The B-25 and A-20 were effective medium bombers, but they couldn't match the Mosquito's speed and range. No other aircraft combined the Mosquito's speed, versatility, and survivability. German aircraft designers recognized the Mosquito's superiority and attempted to copy the concept. The Focke-Wulf T-154 was designed as a high-speed wooden bomber directly inspired by the Mosquito's success. But it entered production too late and in too few numbers to matter. The Germans had spent the war developing heavily armed, heavily armored aircraft, while Britain's obsolete wooden design outperformed everything they built. American forces, initially skeptical of the wooden British aircraft, eventually operated limited numbers of Mosquitoes in specialized roles. American pilots reported similar enthusiasm to their British counterparts. The United States even considered license-producing Mosquitoes in America, though this never materialized due to unfamiliarity with wood construction techniques. American aircraft remained metal, but American designers acknowledged the Mosquito demonstrated approaches they hadn't considered. Charles Walker died in 1968 at age 72. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his long career at de Havilland, but didn't mention the Mosquito. Only aviation historians and Mosquito veterans knew his crucial role in creating the aircraft. He'd remained humble and quiet about his contributions, consistent with his personality throughout his career. But Jeffrey de Havilland, who died in 1965, had acknowledged Walker's contribution in his memoir published shortly before his death. De Havilland wrote, "The Mosquito succeeded because multiple people contributed essential elements. My design team created the detailed engineering. My son conducted the test flying, but Charlie Walker provided the vision. He saw what the aircraft needed to be before anyone else. He fought for it when others dismissed it. The Mosquito was Charlie's aircraft as much as anyone's." This acknowledgement from the company founder validated Walker's legacy. He'd been right about speed over armor, right about wood construction, right about unarmed bombers, right about versatility. He'd been right about everything the experts said was wrong. And his being right had created an aircraft that helped Britain survive the war and contributed significantly to Allied victory. The mathematics support Walker's vindication. The Mosquito destroyed approximately 600 German aircraft in aerial combat while losing approximately 250 Mosquitoes to all causes in fighter operations, a kill ratio of approximately 2.4 to 1. The Mosquito bomber variants flew approximately 39,000 bombing sorties while losing approximately 250 aircraft to all causes, a loss rate of approximately 0.6%. The reconnaissance variants flew over 39,000 sorties with fewer than 100 losses, approximately 0.2% loss rate. These statistics represented the lowest loss rates and highest effectiveness ratios of virtually any combat aircraft in World War II. The unarmed wooden aircraft that Charles Walker had advocated, that the Air Ministry had rejected, had proven more survivable and more effective than heavily armed metal aircraft designed according to established doctrine. How one British mechanic's illegal idea built Britain's deadliest fighter is ultimately a story about courage to challenge authority, wisdom to recognize what truly matters, and determination to pursue innovation despite institutional opposition. Charles Walker wasn't supposed to design aircraft. He was a mechanic, a quality inspector, someone who built things rather than designed them. But he understood combat requirements better than designers who'd never faced enemy fire or bureaucrats who'd never built aircraft. His illegal idea, rejected as impractical and impossible, became the de Havilland Mosquito, arguably the most effective combat aircraft of World War II when measured by versatility, survivability, and combat effectiveness per aircraft produced. The wooden wonder that shouldn't have been built became the aircraft Germany couldn't stop, Britain couldn't produce fast enough, and pilots couldn't praise highly enough. Walker's legacy extends beyond the Mosquito itself. He demonstrated that innovation often comes from unexpected sources. That practical experience sometimes reveals truths that theoretical analysis misses. That institutional resistance to radical ideas can be overcome through persistence and determination, and that the most effective solutions sometimes violate every established principle because the principles themselves are wrong. The Mosquito succeeded because Walker refused to accept that his idea was illegal or impossible. He knew it would work because he understood aircraft construction at fundamental level that formal education couldn't provide. He persisted because he believed British pilots deserved better than what established thinking could provide. And he succeeded because eventually, reality demonstrated that his heretical ideas were actually correct. The panels of wood that formed the Mosquito's structure, the empty gun turret positions that weren't there, the streamlined shape that resulted from removing unnecessary armor and armament all represented Walker's vision made physical. They proved that sometimes the best solution violates every rule. That defense isn't always armor and guns, and that speed can be weapon more powerful than firepower. Charles Walker, a mechanic who committed professional heresy by challenging Air Ministry doctrine, created Britain's deadliest fighter by being right when everyone said he was wrong. His illegal idea became legal through success. His impossible aircraft became reality through determination, and his revolutionary concept became conventional wisdom after the Mosquito demonstrated that everything the experts believed about combat aircraft design was backwards. The story of the Mosquito is Charles Walker's story, the story of how practical wisdom overcame bureaucratic resistance, how one man's vision, dismissed as illegal and impossible, became the aircraft that helped save Britain and changed aerial warfare forever. The wooden wonder was Walker's vindication, proof that mechanics sometimes understand what engineers miss, that heresy is sometimes truth, and that the most illegal ideas sometimes build the deadliest fighters.